We are heading up to our last panel before lunch. I'll welcome Anna Heim, who's a reporter at TechCrunch in the panel that will shine a light on that growth path. And we will hear from our panelists that have proven that they can scale businesses. Lara Warnier, Chief Growth Officer at GoStudent, Pieterjan Bouten, co-founder and executive chairman of Showpad, and Delia König, Chief Produce Officer at Solarisbank, will join Anna for this panel. Enjoy the talk.
So thanks for sticking with us before lunch. I wanted to emphasize that this is the Inspire stage, and we have really 3 inspiring examples of growing a company, but also people were able to share how they've done it, been there, done that, and that's really what I want to hear from them. So I guess in terms of growing, the path is always really impressive. And Loha, I wanted to ask you about your experience when you joined GoStudent. How many people were there, and what did you expect?
Yeah, so when I joined GoStudent, so GoStudent, for those who don't know us, we are the #1 edtech in Europe, valued at 3 billion, and we do online tutoring for kids from the age of 6 to 18 years old. When I joined GoStudent, so it was 3 years and a half ago, there was actually only 2 founders in the company, and they were working with a few freelancers and a few students, so I joined as a second full-time employee. And I had hope and ambition to actually join a company that had the potential to become a unicorn. I came from Google back in the days, and I saw how big a company, a startup can become, and how it can bring actually value to the world. So I had this ambition in mind, but when I joined, I didn't have the expectation actually to join such a big company, because the 2 founders were actually 26 years old at that time. They were still very young, and but I just had the feeling that there was something. So at the beginning, when the recruiter contacted me, they actually told me, yeah, there is this company, they have like a mobile chat for students, and I was like, okay, that's nice, but they are very young, and I actually really want to go to a company that has a very unicorn potential. And then they told me, just get to know the founders, you will see. And indeed, I was actually very impressed by the background of one of the founders, who actually got his bachelor in mathematics at the age of 18 years old. And I was like, okay, this is a smart guy, and at the same time very ambitious, and he had a very strong complementary founder. And then I was like, okay, I take the adventure, let's see where it brings me. And now 3 years and a half later, we moved from being 2 people in the basement of a boat school, so it's not just a stereotype, it really happens, to now being 2,000 employees across 24 countries, and selling 1.5 million tutoring sessions on a monthly basis. So yeah, it was quite a big adventure.
I'm sure. So PJ, in your case, you were founder, so I guess the ambition was also yours, but did you expect, for instance, that the US would be your biggest market?
Yeah, when we started Showpad, we immediately thought global, in the sense of Showpad's a platform to make sales teams more productive, and the country with most salespeople out there is the US. So immediately from the start, in terms of website, but also like marketing campaigns or events that we would start attending, trying to get new customers, we had a big focus on the US. And from the first 10 Showpad customers, the first 3 were, I call them the fools, friend fools and family. I always joke to my friends, you guys were the fools. And then, but within our first 10 customers, we had 3 US companies already using our product, but we didn't have a team there, we didn't have a presence doing everything from Belgium. And we kept it that way for the first 2 years until we were like, hey, we have BASF, we have American Airlines, we have big companies using our product. Maybe a good idea to start building out a team there. So first 2 years, big focus on building product in Belgium, but immediately already starting to sell into the US. And then after 2 years of a lot of late night calls, Louis, my co-founder, relocated to the US, and we started spending also a lot of time there. I split my time 50-50, living 6 months in Europe, 6 months in the US for about 6-7 years. And yeah, hiring and scaling the team there then.
Mm-hmm. And Delia, in terms of timing, what's the right timing to go international? In your case, how did Solarisbank think about that?
Yeah, I think for Solaris it's a bit of a special case. So we got our banking license 6 years ago. And with banking licenses, especially like in the European context, to go international and to expand is quite tricky because let's just say like regulation doesn't necessarily enable the growth, but you kind of have to be creative and grow with with the market potential to really make sure that your organization can actually even go outside of Germany or outside of the country that you're in. So I think there is no like general answer to what is the right point in time. For us, I think it was after 2-3 years when we kind of like found the market fit in Germany and then could really take this and take the knowledge outside of Germany. Now we're active in France, Italy, and Spain. We last year also acquired a company in the UK. So really want to basically have this very European approach to grow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, acquisitions is definitely an interesting way to grow. Do you have any thoughts on that, Laura or PJ?
Yeah, definitely. So for ourselves, we have actually acquired 3 companies so far. So one in Austria, one in the UK, and one in Spain. Each of them actually having also footprint outside of their home market. And yes, it's definitely a good push for growth. For us, the main objective is also to kind of bring more services to our customers to really enlarge our whole ecosystem. So our core product is one-on-one online tutoring, but then we are bringing content around it. Also, like we have acquired a marketplace in Spain to also like broaden actually our customer base. Also looking at like the school system. So we have acquired a company that's called School Fox Education, and they provide a messaging system between schools and the parents. So for us, it was on the one hand a role for acquisition in terms of growth, to push the growth, but also at the same time on the product, because when we are in a hyper-growth company, we do not have the time anymore to spend another 1 or 2 years maybe to enhance the product. And then there are so many companies out there who have done it, and then we can just do kind of a plug and play and integrate them in our offering and in our culture.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Peter, you're also in Angel, so would you advise, for instance, companies right now to look for acquisition targets in the current climate?
Yeah, maybe first, I think from my experience with Showpad, we've done a ton of acquisitions, I think 7 or 8 across the spectrum. So I would say acqui-hires, where we just wanted to have the team and their knowledge, to product, where we were basically buying the IP of and maybe some people as well, and then like a full-fledged, like we acquired a company with like 50, 60 people and integrated them. So I think when it comes to acquisitions, and we've learned a lot of hard lessons along the way, kind of doing them, because our latest acquisition, which we've done 3 years ago, which was a big one, took us basically 18 months to 2 years to fully digest, integrate, get the product working. We had this platform vision, and then Showpad starts from was basically a content product, and then we added a training and coaching layer on top of that to make sure that commercial teams could have better enablement. So I think acquisitions are a great way to boost your growth, a great way to improve your product or sell more product, a great way to get talent on board. But I also would be super cautious about, like, it's not because something theoretically or on paper looks great or kind of like aligns with your vision that immediately you should go out and execute that, because it's also a massive distraction. It takes a ton of resources. It always goes slower than you think. And so the nice thing was with Showpad, there's acquisitions that we didn't pursue, and there's acquisitions that we did pursue, and some worked out super well, and others didn't work out, and they all had their reasons. And I think along the way, as long as you're kind of like keep focused on where do you want to achieve, be very focused with your resources. At the end of the day, you're always resource constrained. And I think when it comes to acquisitions, make sure it kind of, you have to be 100% convinced. It's a lot people-driven. Kind of the people you're getting on board you really need to kind of be 100% aligned with them and understand what are their motivations to do this acquisition or to join your company. Go really deep there, also on a personal level, and then kind of push super hard on then focusing on integrating and kind of getting the acquisition to work, because it's hard. But the good thing is now for us, like 80% of our revenue comes from that acquisition, in the sense of comes from that platform vision that we realized. But the first 2 years of those 3 to getting there were just immensely painful. So.
And I think what is interesting, what Yves says, also like talking about focus, because I think as an entrepreneur, you get excited about everything that you see, and then you feel like, okay, this company could also be part of our ecosystem, and this and this and this. At the same time, I mean, even if investors are following you, you still have a limited cash, and you need to decide also which one makes the most sense and having the biggest impact.
But then with Delia, we talked a bit about being flexible as well, and I was wondering how that balances with the initial vision, how you adjust along the way.
Yeah, I think like staying flexible as a company is very important, especially with this growth speed that all of our companies have, right? So when we started Solarisbank, for example, we were just a super small team in a tiny office in Berlin, kind of like working together. Then we grew like to a couple of hundred people, and then you kind of cannot work anymore in this very intimate team-based environment. You have to empower the people. You have to kind of like be more product-centric, enable the people to really like work on or feel responsibility and accountability for their area. Then again, with internationalization, you have like new challenges, so you need to adapt there as well. And I feel staying agile also from a mindset perspective and rather focusing on collaboration and getting further as a team rather than being very, let's say, ego-focused and title and position-focused. This is really important, and that also plays a bit into what you said about like the motive behind the people that you get on board, right? I feel the most important thing that you can do is kind of like foster a no-ego culture in order for your business to be successful, because in the end, most of the startups and ventures are, like, employees are usually very incentivized by shares and stocks and options, so it should be at the goal of all of us to hire better people than ourselves and to become more successful at a team and not only as like the person climbing the career ladder. And I feel this is something that we forget from time to time in the daily business, but we should be more conscious of. Yeah.
I see you agreeing, Laura.
100%, and I would say on top of that, it's actually the role actually of the leaders in the company to bring confidence to the people that they have in their team, because so people who are confident will feel actually comfortable to actually hire people who have more expertise, more knowledge than them. But if they are feeling like stress or like feeling that maybe they are not ready for what the job that they have, then they will feel like, okay, I only need to hire people who are not going to challenge me more. So yeah, I fully agree with you, and I would add on top the confidence.
Do you have any thoughts on hiring, Vijay?
Yeah, I mean, hiring, you can write a book of it, obviously, when you're an entrepreneur. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of the challenges you face are people-related in terms of the work you're doing. I think in startups and venture capital, I think Martin said it, like 99% of the value, it's people and their brains and what they do, and especially how you let them collaborate. And for me, hiring, I think there's... In the early stages of founding Showpad, I was like, yeah, you know, culture, and the culture is basically your 10, 20 people, and it's very clear what the culture and the values are, and you don't have to write it out. And I thought, we will never have to write this out, because, yeah, we're Showpad, we know what we stand for. And then as the company scaled and grew, you definitely start to realize, like, and even more than with distributed workforce, is like you need to be very specific in terms of what your culture is. You need to think very carefully how you can. It's similar like a product, you know, looking at culture as a product as well. Like what, you know, understanding what is that culture, and then how can we improve it, or what are the things that we can do as a company to maintain a great culture, attract great talent, because ultimately that's what attracts, when it comes to talent, the very best people. And over the years, you learn a lot of things there, and we've done some things that you know work really well at Showpad in terms of culture, and it's you know, small things and big things, and I think it all, but really spending time there has a massive impact for me on talent, because that's the way to attract and then keep, because it's one question is like. Basically, a lot of people are attracted to, okay, unicorn stories and valuations and crazy things they see in the press, but then sometimes they come into a company and they realize, like, whoa, this is you know, this isn't what I expected, and that's when you have then companies with very high attrition, which is super costly. That's where then a lot of the venture dollars go. So trying to then also think about like, culture to also keep your talent. That's the way how I think about it.
And I would add maybe to this, like the complexity when you start opening more offices, because keeping a culture alive is never easy. And when it's in one office and you're in that office, it's already an easier task. But when you go abroad, and I'm sure you also experienced that, so today we have 24 offices, and having the communication around it to show to people what is actually our values. So in every office, we have our values on the walls. We use all hands to kind of share again our values, to celebrate people based on our values, so what they have done and so on, to kind of make sure that it's, every week they hear about it during the onboarding, so that it's clear for everyone.
Yeah, I completely agree. We basically are doing the same thing. Luckily, we in the very beginning, we hired someone from Zalando, from the people and organization side. So she basically went through the entire like huge growth story, and she said from the very beginning, we have to make the culture and the values very, very explicit. And that helped us a lot because, like as you say, in the beginning, you have a small team, you have your wine evenings and your game evenings and whatnot, so you have a shared understanding. But as you grow, especially nowadays with remote first, you need to get this shared understanding via the purpose and via the values. So this, I feel, is immensely important. And also here, like we changed the values every couple of years. We now did that because they can also change with a growing company and growing organization. I think it's quite natural. The one value that actually never changed was collaboration. So this is something I feel that is again very important for this growth culture. As you said, like making this explicit, repeating it in all the ceremonies that you have as a company, and celebrating the people based on it is the most important thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on it briefly, this sense of ownership that employees need to feel for the company to really grow. How do you push for that in a culture that's not necessarily centered on stock options and so on? Do you convince people that they should take stock, or how do you combine that with hiring?
So maybe just speaking from experience, what we did in the beginning. So we started very classic, because also for a bank you have to have kind of like this organigram that is quite hierarchical, with different functions and so on. But what we very shortly realized is if you work so much in this kind of like functional teams, that you obviously have different incentives. So we're a B2B company, and there, sales want to sell, product wants to build standardized products, compliance want to be, as secure as possible, and the teams, of course, they optimized within themselves, but maybe not necessarily globally. So what we did then was really creating cross-functional teams with an ownership for a specific product. So you have a sales manager, a compliance manager, a product manager, a legal, and so on, all in like one team working on the same product, having OKRs together, where like a goal framework basically to really work on the same thing. And I feel this kind of like giving a strategic outlook, defining what do we want to achieve as a company and how this breaks down, that is one way to achieve that.
And I would say for me that ownership is actually a feeling, and it's not something that by giving shares you can actually create. I think giving shares is a good way to incentivize employees who, to be honest, are going to work much harder than in any other company, and that they can actually benefit from all the effort that are being built from a monetary perspective. But ownership comes from accountability. Accountability of the person who did something feels when something is going wrong, they feel accountable for it, but also they feel that it's also their own success when something is going right. And then it's not just, coming just from the founders or whatever. Every employee is important, like every employee is part of the puzzle, and we need to celebrate employees individually for the success that they have brought to the company. And I agree with you, it's like at the end of the day, so you have this ownership, people need to know exactly what they're accountable for, what they are responsible for, and then you need to have a strong leadership where they're bringing everyone to the same direction. When you're in a hyperscale company, we have hired more than 1,000 employees within a year, I felt also at one point that I was more like the dog who is like gathering all the sheep together. So you have all of those super brains, super intelligent, expert people who are super willing to build something, and you need to leave them the freedom. But you need to bring them into a frame where they don't just go crazy, but they go all together into the right direction into the same goal, but you give them the freedom to do things. And I always say that speed comes with trust.
Yeah, I think already some great points made here. From my perspective, I like to think about in companies that grow very fast and with constantly new people coming in and new priorities can shift and things like that. Make it very clear in terms of what the long-term goal is and vision of the company. Make it very clear what are the key KPIs that you're tracking, and I don't think it should be more than maybe 4 or something. We have 4 important KPIs at Showpad, and that's what we track in terms of like what we want to have people work on, and make sure that there's then clear, I think as long as, make sure there's a clear link between the day-to-day responsibilities and activities of a person and the most important things and priorities for the company. And I think the goal of leaders there is then to make sure that context is there, that those priorities are set. And I think that's when you get a lot of ownership, because people understand how are they contributing to this important, whether it's an NPS goal or maybe net retention or whatever your KPIs are in terms of like what you want to achieve. And I think that and that then enables growth conversations also with people in terms of, hey, why are you not happy in your role, or what can you improve, or how have you or haven't you contributed to this goal, for example.
Mm-hmm. And I know our panel has best practices in our title, so I was wondering if each of you could share one best practice that you would recommend, especially for people who are early on in their journey, which I think most people.
So I'm maybe going to go back to something that you actually said earlier, and it's a learning that I also made at Google. Eric Schmidt had a saying, A employees hire A employees, B employees hire C employees. And it's super important that the first employees that you're going to hire, we're going to build the foundation for your company. We're going to become the leaders of tomorrow. That you really hire the best people. It doesn't mean that they have the expertise. That means that they actually have the competence, the willingness, the ambition, and that they, as I was saying earlier, the confidence actually to also hire people who will know more than me. I was 28 years old when I joined the company. Today I'm leading like a whole team of marketing. All the people who are below me know more than me on certain topics. Some people have 10, 20 years of experience more than me. And at the end of the day, that's because we bring it together that it works. So my advice is really hire people who know more than you and who can really complement you.
To add to that, because for sure I agree 100%, really enable these people so that they are entrepreneurs within the company and stay as flexible as possible. So again, no ego company.
Yeah, for me, my advice, what has been most, I think, transformational for me in my 10, 11 years at Showpad is, in the early days, I was like, oh, I'm going to figure this out myself. I got this, and yes, you have VCs and people that give you some advice, and I had a board of advisors and stuff like that. But I wasn't always listening or kind of like always open to that personal growth that you also need to go through. We're talking about growth and what it means to grow a company, and I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs here, aspiring entrepreneurs or maybe entrepreneurs a bit earlier in the journey, and I think it's one of the most fantastic journeys, but it's also a journey where you as a leader, co-founder, CEO, you will have to reinvent yourself a couple of times or kind of like figure out your path there. And for me, the most transformational there, the first time I then got a really good executive coach who really kind of kept a mirror in front of me of like, PJ, you're saying A, but you're doing B, and kind of like really kind of like making me think about my leadership style, making me think about like decisions I take and how I take and communicate them. And for me, that helped me a lot in terms of like, yes, there's all the business aspects of scaling a business. I think there's also a very big personal aspect of growing and scaling a business. And I think you mentioned I do some angel investing as well. And for me, the very best, sometimes I see great products, great ideas, but the reason sometimes then companies don't work out or don't get to the next stage is really more personal issues or founder issues. And so it comes down to kind of like, keep investing in yourself, keep an open mind, try to surround yourself with good people, and the good people are not necessarily the people who will say what you want to hear. And I think that's my advice.
That's great because that's also touching on mistakes to avoid, I guess. For instance, not listening to advice and so on. I was wondering if you have any advice on mistakes to avoid.
I'm actually a kind of person who say, you will do mistakes, do your mistakes. I think if you actually are afraid of doing mistakes, you will not succeed because you just need to take risk and you need to be confident that whatever comes on your way, you will figure it out. That's how we approach, for example, international expansion in the company. There are some companies who do months of analyzing a market to decide which market to go next. We were just taking half a day, not even, and then we're just saying, okay, we go there, we're just gonna make it. We hire the people to do it, and then we'll see, and we'll figure it out. So for me, it's just like the mistakes that I might not have done, because if I would have known, I would have done other mistakes. So I would not just say, do your mistakes. That's my message.
That's fair, but I guess that's also a bit different in a regulated environment like banking, or it could be in health tech. So how do you adjust in that case?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is when hiring. So we touched a lot on like how important people are to build the company, and when it comes to hiring people, not like looking too much on the CV and what is there all on the CV and like that it's super long and lots of experience, but rather like looking at the mindset. So this is maybe like a lesson learned from our side, especially like. Having this weird combination out of very traditional banking and tech, that's a quite challenging field. So this would be something that I would at least advise. And maybe in hindsight, I think what we should have done much more in the beginning already is investing into diversity, because this is kind of a vicious circle, especially in fintech where you have this double trouble of both finance and tech. It's really hard to correct that later on, because then you already have this very weird ratio, and it's really hard to pull it up. So maybe these two things.
Yeah, that's a great point. Maybe not so much framing it in terms of mistakes, but things that are hard to correct later on. Did you find any of these along your journey?
Yeah, I mean, thousands. I think it's like all of little things, but yeah, you kind of tend to forget. But I would say, for example, and sometimes it's like mistakes that you make, but consciously, right? So again, talking back to international expansion, we consciously make the mistake to actually launch without maybe having the whole legal entity or payroll completely ready. But why? Because for us, speed was the #1 focus. So you always come actually in business, you always have like trade-off, and you have to decide, and you're gonna make maybe mistakes, but you consciously make that mistake. So for us, I would say really, for example, right now, we know exactly how to enter a new market, right? We know all the to-dos, like we have a huge playbook that tells us exactly step by step what to do. And back in the days, we had to take decisions that sometimes were not the right one, the type of company to set up, for example, the type of legal entity, how to find the first employees. What is actually hiring the first employees? So we have hired now 15 country managers. There were some country managers that were better than others, and then we've learned which type of personalities we're looking for, and then maybe a country manager for launching a new market is different than a country manager that you plug in when a market is already 300 people. So it's, I think mistakes are so proper to your own business that I think it's really hard to actually share them, kind of. Or then you need to have very specific question. It's more learnings.
Yeah. But how about playbooks then? PJ, for instance, both of you are angel investing, but do you share any playbook with the companies you work with?
It depends. Most of my investments are B2B SaaS companies, so there's some learnings that are across the companies. I invest pretty early stage, so there's a lot of value as well in letting people figure out the market, the product market fit, kind of their culture. But I think for me the things that I like to be where I like to support entrepreneurs, for example, is when we're investing in a company and they're looking to hire senior leaders. I've interviewed a lot of people in the last 10 years, and I've seen great leaders do great things. I've also seen what happens if you hire a wrong executive, or if you don't act upon maybe some of the signals that maybe somebody isn't the right person fast enough, and that's a mistake I made, for example, in the past. So, do I have a playbook? no, but obviously there's key things that are super important when you're in enterprise SaaS, or things that we always look at, especially once you're in the market and selling product. And it's obviously when there's a land and expand model, you want to see high net retention. When I always like to operationalize a way to how to get both qualitative and quantitative customer feedback in a way that it's kind of automatically infused in your roadmap or impacting your roadmap. There's always a part of product which is more maybe linked to vision and where you want to go, but there's also a part of if you have a product out there, well, the customers have a lot of the answers. So it's some of these things that we do, but yeah, I think I'm always a little bit like Playbook. A lot of people believe there's a playbook, and I think there's definitely, certain truths out there and certain things that are very important, and certain people come with a playbook. But I think you have to be careful of people who say I'm going to come here and now I'm just going to execute on the playbook. You need people who have a playbook, but who have then the flexibility to adjust it to your product, your market, where you are in the stage of the journey. And I think those are the most amazing hires, or those are the times that a playbook works, because people who've seen scale 1, 2, 3 multiple times, obviously they come with certain things that are important. But be careful of if somebody's just super rigid and say I have a playbook and this is how we're gonna do it. Well, I've seen that story a couple of times at Showpad, and it didn't work. So
that's great. I think that's a great note too. And then because we're out of time, unfortunately, but also because you said being flexible, I think that's one of the key takeaways. And also go out there and do it. I think that's one of the main points. So thank you very much.
all right.